The year was 1579, and Japan stood at the height of the Sengoku period, an age of fractured warlords and endless conflict. Yet on the island of Kyushu, far from the courts of power, a ship arrived bearing something none had ever seen before. Among its passengers was a man who would capture the imagination of all who laid eyes on him. His name was Yasuke. No Japanese record describes his life before that moment. Some believe he came from the east coast of Africa, perhaps Mozambique or Ethiopia, though others suggest he had once lived in India before journeying farther still. What is certain is that he arrived with Jesuit missionaries, serving as a protector and assistant. To them, he was both bodyguard and symbol of their reach across the seas. But in Japan, his role would transform. He would become legend. When Yasuke first stepped onto Japanese soil, the effect was immediate. He towered over the crowd, taller than any man they had ever seen, his skin dark as night, his frame massive with muscle. His very presence seemed to bend the air. Crowds swarmed around him, hundreds pressing close, children squealing with laughter and fear. Farmers dropped their baskets, merchants abandoned their stalls. Samurai, warriors, left their guard posts just to follow him down the street. Many could not believe their eyes. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said his skin was painted with ink or soot. Others whispered he was a demon or a spirit sent from distant lands. In one town, it was recorded that men rushed forward with cloth and water, determined to scrub the color away. They rubbed until the skin turned red with irritation, but the dark hue remained. The truth was undeniable. Yasuke was real, and unlike any man in Japan. For days, wherever he went, chaos followed. Markets closed, temples filled with questions, and rumors of his arrival reached all the way to Kyoto, the capital where warlords and courtiers vied for influence. Among those who heard was a man who cared more for power and curiosity than tradition, Oda Nobunaga, one of the most powerful daimyo, feudal lords, of the age. Nobunaga was unlike other lords. He had embraced the new weapons, muskets from Portugal, that others dismissed as dishonorable. He collected foreign books, maps, and instruments. He even kept rare animals in his court to astonish visitors. To a man like him, the arrival of Yasuke was no mere curiosity. It was an opportunity. Nobunaga sent word immediately, "Bring this man to me." The missionaries hesitated. Yasuke was no ordinary servant, and they feared what might come of placing him before such a powerful lord. But they had little choice. When a daimyo commanded, refusal was unthinkable. And so Yasuke was summoned to Azuchi Castle. What lay ahead would change his life forever. In the shadow of war and ambition, a man from across the seas was about to step into the pages of Japanese history. The road to Azuchi Castle stretched through valleys and hills, lined with villages buzzing with anticipation. Yasuke traveled with the missionaries who had brought him, but it was clear that the focus was no longer on their religious mission. Everywhere they went, people gathered in crowds too large to control. Mothers lifted children onto their shoulders just to glimpse him. Samurai, warriors, followed at a distance, muttering among themselves. Some knelt in the dirt as if he were a spirit. Others jeered, unable to reconcile what they saw with anything they knew. By the time Yasuke reached the gates of Nobunaga's fortress, the streets of Azuchi were clogged with thousands of onlookers. Reports say people climbed walls and rooftops just to peer at him as he passed. Some shouted prayers, others curses. The guards, though trained to ignore distraction, could not hide their curiosity. Inside the castle, the atmosphere was no less tense. Nobunaga's retainers whispered among themselves. Some expected a monster, others a trick. None knew what would happen when their lord came face to face with the man from across the seas. At last, Yasuke was led into the great hall. Nobunaga sat at its head, not in elaborate robes but in the mix of armor and silk he favored. His presence was commanding, his eyes sharp and restless. This was a man feared by all and respected by few, yet in this moment even he was curious. Yasuke bowed deeply. Nobunaga raised a hand. "Bring water," he ordered. 2 attendants approached with bowls. They scrubbed at Yasuke's skin with cloths, their hands trembling. The courtiers leaned forward, waiting to see the trick revealed. But no trick came. The water darkened only with dust. Yasuke's skin remained the same. A murmur rose across the hall. Nobunaga leaned forward, his eyes alight not with anger, but fascination. "Enough," he said. "He is no painted ghost. He is real." Through interpreters, Nobunaga began to question him. Where had he come from? What battles had he seen? What gods did his people worship? Yasuke answered as best he could, his words halting but steady. The language was unfamiliar, but his discipline was clear. Finally, Nobunaga ordered a test of strength. One of his largest samurai stepped forward, armored and grinning with confidence. Yasuke did not hesitate. He stepped close, lifted the man from the ground, and held him effortlessly before setting him gently back down. The hall erupted. Some gasped in awe, others laughed in disbelief. Nobunaga clapped his hands and laughed louder than them all. "Not just a curiosity," he said. "A warrior." The laughter faded into silence as Nobunaga stood. He looked upon Yasuke with a calculating expression. Few men in Nobunaga's court had ever earned his respect so quickly. Most fought for years to prove themselves. Yet here was a man who had done it in a single day. That night, Yasuke was invited to dine at Nobunaga's own table. It was an honor no foreigner had ever received. The meal was quiet, but the gesture spoke louder than words. Nobunaga saw not a servant, not a novelty, but potential. The courtiers exchanged nervous glances. They had witnessed something unprecedented. Respect would not come easily for Yasuke. He would still face scorn and suspicion. But the door had opened wider than anyone could have imagined. For Yasuke, the path of destiny had begun. Nobunaga was not a man to hand out honor without reason. Though impressed, he did not simply grant Yasuke a high position. Instead, he placed him among the guards at Azuchi Castle. It was here, in the shadows of stone walls and echoing courtyards, that Yasuke began his true test. At first, many saw him as an outsider unworthy of respect. Rival retainers mocked his foreign speech and appearance. Some challenged him openly, hoping to drive him into anger and disgrace. But Yasuke refused to be provoked. He bowed with discipline, carried out orders with precision, and trained relentlessly. Every insult he met with silence. Every challenge he met with calm. The daily routines of samurai, warriors, life were strict. He rose before dawn, bathed in cold water, and trained in the yard until sweat darkened the ground beneath him. He practiced with wooden swords against groups of opponents, testing balance and endurance. At night he studied Japanese words, repeating phrases until they became second nature. Slowly, his speech grew more fluid, his movements more precise. In time, Nobunaga rewarded this discipline. He gave Yasuke a residence near the castle, small but respectable, a sign that he was no mere guest. Then came something greater still. Nobunaga presented him with a katana, sword. It was not just a weapon but a symbol. To wear the katana was to be acknowledged as samurai. Few foreigners ever touched such a blade. Fewer still were entrusted with it. But recognition brought new enemies. Some among Nobunaga's ranks sneered at the thought of serving alongside a foreigner. They whispered that Yasuke was only a toy of their lord's curiosity. Others plotted to humiliate him. Once, during training, a retainer struck Yasuke deliberately hard, hoping to draw anger. Yasuke steadied himself, bowed, and returned the strike with perfect control, firm, but not cruel. The watching men were left in silence. Discipline had spoken louder than fury. Nobunaga himself took note. One evening, after a long day of drills, he summoned Yasuke to his chambers. Through an interpreter, he asked, "Why do you endure their scorn?" Why not strike back and silence them? Yasuke paused, choosing his words carefully. Because honor does not bend to insult. It bends only to truth. Nobunaga leaned back, considering. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Then we shall see your truth. From that day forward, Yasuke was not merely tolerated. He was being tested, weighed, and prepared. He had stepped onto the path of a samurai, not by birthright, but by resolve. Still, the eyes of the court remained upon him. Some waited for his failure. Others began to wonder if this man might prove greater than they imagined. Azuchi Castle was more than a fortress. It was a statement of Nobunaga's power, built high above Lake Biwa, its walls gleaming white, its towers visible for miles. Yet even the strongest fortress could be shaken by rumor and unrest. Yasuke, now among the castle guards, soon faced his first true test, not of strength, but of judgment. It began on a spring afternoon when shouts rose from the main gate. A band of armed men approached, demanding entry. They claimed insult from a rival clan and demanded to confront Nobunaga directly. The lord was away on campaign, leaving only a skeleton force to hold the castle. The intruders outnumbered the defenders 3-1. Tension spread like fire through the ranks. Some of the younger guards reached for their swords, eager to fight. Others whispered of retreat. Yasuke, standing among them, saw panic brewing. He stepped forward and raised his hand. "Hold," he commanded in halting but firm Japanese. His voice carried the weight of certainty. The men hesitated. Yasuke approached the gate alone. He studied the intruders carefully, their weapons, their banners, their formation. They were not prepared for a siege, nor eager for a full battle. They sought intimidation, not war. Speaking slowly, Yasuke addressed them. "This is Oda land. To dishonor these gates is to invite his wrath. You will not enter." The intruders laughed, mocking his accent and appearance. One jeered, "Does Nobunaga hide behind a foreigner now?" The men shouted, their hands on sword hilts. Yasuke did not flinch. He gave the order, "Light the torches. Sound the horns." The guards obeyed. Flames flared along the walls. Horns blared across the courtyard. From the outside, it looked as if an entire garrison had been roused. The intruders shifted uneasily. Their leader frowned, weighing risk against pride. Yasuke stood motionless, spear in hand, a wall of calm resolve. Minutes passed, heavy as stones. Then the leader spat on the ground and signaled retreat. The armed men withdrew, muttering threats but leaving without bloodshed. When Nobunaga returned and heard the tale, he summoned Yasuke before him. "You faced many with few. Why did you not fight?" Yasuke answered simply, "Because victory is not always in the blade. Sometimes it is in the mind." Nobunaga's eyes narrowed, then softened. He nodded. "You held with more than strength. You held with judgment." From that day, Yasuke was more than a guard. He was recognized as a retainer, trusted with greater responsibility. For the first time, whispers in the court began to shift. Some still mocked him, but others began to respect him. He had proven that his value lay not just in the power of his arms, but in the clarity of his mind. Azuchi Castle had gained more than a foreign warrior. It had gained a strategist. Azuchi Castle was alive with splendor and danger in equal measure. Behind its painted screens and golden halls, whispers carried further than footsteps. Nobunaga's brilliance attracted loyalty, but also envy, and in the tense politics of his court, every new retainer was weighed like a blade on a scale. Yasuke, more visible than any other, drew sharper scrutiny than most. Some viewed him with open admiration, a living symbol of Nobunaga's reach beyond Japan. Others saw him as a threat, a disruption to traditions that had defined the samurai, warrior, class for centuries. To them, Yasuke was not a comrade, but a rival. Among Nobunaga's generals was Akechi Mitsuhide, a man of refinement and cunning. He watched Yasuke with a calculating gaze, offering polite words that concealed deeper suspicion. To Mitsuhide, Yasuke was more than an oddity, he was a reminder of Nobunaga's unpredictability, his willingness to discard custom in pursuit of his vision. Yet Yasuke also found allies. One was Mori Ranmaru, Nobunaga's young and loyal page, who admired Yasuke's discipline and often trained with him in the courtyards. Another was Tokigawa Kazumasu, a seasoned general who respected strength but valued restraint even more. Kazumasu tested Yasuke daily, sometimes with sparring blades, sometimes with riddles of strategy. Strength is nothing without patience, he told him. Even Nobunaga forgets this. The tension at court was unspoken but constant. Some mocked Yasuke in whispers, saying he was only a toy of Nobunaga's fascination. Others plotted to test him more directly. Once, a retainer deliberately spilled ink on Yasuke's robes during a meeting. Yasuke bowed, cleaned the mess without complaint, and continued listening. Another time, he was baited with insults about his homeland. He answered with silence, his eyes steady, his posture unyielding. But patience had its limits. One evening, during a feast, a drunken samurai demanded Yasuke wrestle him before the assembled court. Nobunaga allowed it. Yasuke accepted, stepping into the hall's center. The man charged recklessly. Yasuke held his ground, redirected the force, and pinned him without cruelty. The hall erupted with laughter, half mocking the defeated man, half cheering Yasuke. Nobunaga watched quietly, then raised his cup in acknowledgement. Whispers turned to debates. Was Yasuke merely strong, or was he wise enough to survive in a court of serpents? He had endured their insults, passed their tests, and earned Nobunaga's favor. Yet with every step he climbed, the shadows grew darker. Akechi Mitsuhide, sipping his wine that night, leaned toward a fellow general and murmured, "The Lord admires him now." But admiration is a blade that cuts both ways. For Yasuke, life at Azuchi was more than survival. It was preparation. Allies stood at his side, but rivals sharpened their daggers in silence. And though he could not see it yet, the greatest betrayal in Nobunaga's life was already taking root. By 1581, Yasuke's place in Nobunaga's court was undeniable, but respect within the walls of Azuchi was one thing. Respect on the battlefield was another. War had been the crucible of every samurai, warrior, and Yasuke had yet to prove himself where it mattered most, under fire. The opportunity came when Nobunaga prepared a campaign against the Ikoiki, a militant group of warrior monks who resisted his growing power. These monks, armed with pikes and faith, had defied great armies before. To crush them would require precision. To falter would invite humiliation. Yasuke marched not in the vanguard, but at Nobunaga's side. His duty was protection, not glory. For days they moved across the countryside, the rhythm of drums and the crackle of matchlock muskets filling the air. Yasuke's towering figure was impossible to miss, drawing stares from allies and enemies alike. Soldiers whispered that he was a demon bound to Nobunaga's service. Some said his presence alone would terrify the enemy. When the battle came, it erupted in chaos. The monks fought with a fury born of faith, their chanting rising above the clash of steel. Nobunaga's lines surged forward, muskets firing in disciplined volleys, while Yasuke remained at his lord's command post. His spear and sword were ready, but his eyes moved constantly, studying the tide of battle. At a critical moment, the monks broke through the lines. A wave of them charged directly toward Nobunaga's position. Retainers rushed to form a shield wall, but panic spread as arrows fell and pikes pressed closer. Nobunaga's life hung in the balance. Yasuke stepped forward. His presence steadied the guards. With precise, deliberate movements, he deflected pikes with his yari, spear, not striking wildly but targeting the rhythm of their advance. He barked orders in broken but firm Japanese, rallying men who moments before had faltered. Ranmaru, at his side, carried messages across the line, repeating Yasuke's commands. The push was repelled. The monks withdrew in confusion, shaken by the unexpected resistance. Nobunaga remained untouched. When the field quieted, Nobunaga turned to Yasuke. "You are more than a blade," he said. "You are a shield." Word spread quickly after that day. The foreigner had stood firm where others wavered. He had not sought glory. He had not chased blood. He had done what was required, he had kept his lord alive. From that moment, Yasuke's reputation changed. He was no longer just the curiosity who had lifted a samurai in the great hall, nor merely the foreigner who baffled intruders at the gate. He was a warrior proven in fire. And in the courts and camps of Japan, men began to speak his name not with laughter, but with respect. Years passed, and Nobunaga's ambitions only grew larger. Province by province, he broke rivals and absorbed their lands. His dream was clear, to unify all of Japan under his rule. To his enemies, he was ruthless, to his allies, he was both inspiring and unpredictable. And through it all, Yasuke remained by his side, a figure both alien and familiar, feared by some but trusted by the Lord himself. Within Nobunaga's court, Yasuke's presence became part of daily life. He trained with other retainers, rode with patrols, and stood guard at councils where decisions that shaped the nation were made. His Japanese had improved, and though his accent remained, his words were steady and precise. He had crossed the line from outsider to participant, a transformation few believed possible when he first arrived. But the higher Yasuke rose, the sharper the dangers became. Nobunaga's enemies outside the walls plotted to destroy him, while rivals within the court envied the attention this foreign warrior received. Some whispered that Yasuke's loyalty was bought, that he would vanish when danger grew too great. Others wondered if Nobunaga trusted him too much. In a world where betrayal was a constant shadow, suspicion never rested. Despite this, Nobunaga often turned to Yasuke in moments of quiet. Once, during a pause between campaigns, he asked, "Do you miss your homeland? The people, the sky, the gods you once prayed to?" Yasuke bowed his head. He thought carefully before answering. "Home is where loyalty lives. My path has brought me here. My loyalty lives with you." Nobunaga chuckled softly, then raised a cup of sake. "Then your loyalty is mine, and mine is yours. Let others question it. We will show them with deeds, not words." Those deeds came quickly. In one campaign, Yasuke was sent with a small force to protect supply lines threatened by bandits loyal to Nobunaga's enemies. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, he held his ground, setting ambushes and using terrain to neutralize the enemy's numbers. When reinforcements finally arrived, the supplies were intact, and his men still stood. It was a quiet victory, but one that proved Yasuke's value was not in spectacle alone. Still, whispers did not fade. At feasts, Nobunaga's generals eyed Yasuke across the room. Mitsuhide, always calm, often spoke polite words that carried double meanings. Ranmaru, young but sharp, warned Yasuke to be cautious. "A smile at court can be sharper than a sword," he said. Yasuke understood. The battlefield was open, the enemy visible. But in the courts of Azuchi, the battlefield was hidden, and the blades were words, not steel. Yet through both fields, one truth endured: Yasuke's loyalty did not falter. He had chosen his place, and he would stand firm, no matter the fire that awaited. The year was 1582. Oda Nobunaga stood closer than any warlord before him to uniting all of Japan. His enemies were broken, his rivals bowed. Yet at the height of his power, fate turned suddenly, carried not by armies from afar but by betrayal within his own ranks. Nobunaga traveled to Kyoto, staying at the Honnoji temple with only a small retinue. He believed the city secure. Yasuke was among those who accompanied him, loyal as always, a watchful guardian in a time of relative calm. The temple was quiet, its courtyards filled with the scent of pine and the sound of temple bells. It seemed a place of peace. But peace in the Sengoku period never lasted long. Before dawn on June 21st, the thunder of drums and the clash of armor shattered the silence. Akechi Mitsuhide, one of Nobunaga's most trusted generals, had turned traitor. With thousands of men, he surrounded the temple. His banners filled the streets. His soldiers carried fire. The attack came swiftly. Arrows rained down. Flames leapt from rooftops. Shouts echoed across the courtyards. Nobunaga's guards fought desperately, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Yasuke, towering above the fray, rallied the defenders, his voice cutting through the chaos. He held the gates as long as possible, his spear flashing in the smoke, his presence alone steadying men who might otherwise have fled. Nobunaga himself donned armor and drew his sword. He fought with ferocity, cutting down attackers even as fire consumed the temple. But he knew the truth, there would be no escape. To be captured was to be humiliated, paraded before enemies, his legacy broken. To Nobunaga, such an end was worse than death. In the inner chamber of Honnoji, Nobunaga made his final choice. Accounts differ on the exact details, but all agree he ended his life on his own terms, denying Mitsuhide the satisfaction of capture. Yasuke tried to follow him into the chamber, but was ordered to remain outside, to continue the defense. The fire grew uncontrollable. Beams collapsed. The temple roared with flames. Yasuke fought his way through the chaos, cutting a path for survivors, ensuring Nobunaga's family retainers and pages could escape. His body bore wounds, his armor scorched, yet he refused to leave until the last moment. When the temple finally collapsed, Nobunaga was gone. Only ash and smoke remained. The lord who had reshaped Japan had fallen in a storm of betrayal. For Yasuke, it was not just the loss of a master. It was the loss of the man who had given him a name in this land, a place among warriors, and a purpose forged in loyalty. The world had changed in a single night, and nothing would ever be the same. The smoke of Honnoji still hung over Kyoto when word spread, Oda Nobunaga was dead, struck down not by an enemy army but by the treachery of his own general, Akechi Mitsuhide. The shock rippled across the land. Some rejoiced, seeing their greatest rival destroyed. Others trembled, knowing the fragile balance Nobunaga had built was now shattered. For Yasuke, the loss was personal. He had stood beside his lord in the final hours, seen the flames consume the temple, and fought to the last moment. But when the fire died, so too did the man who had given Yasuke purpose in this strange land. He wandered through the smoldering ruins, his armor blackened, his hands trembling not from fear but from grief. The surviving defenders were hunted down quickly. Yasuke was captured and brought before Mitsuhide. The traitor studied him with cold eyes. Accounts differ on what was said, but many agree Mitsuhide did not see Yasuke as a prize of war. He dismissed him as a curiosity, saying a foreigner could never truly be a samurai. Some records claim Mitsuhide ordered Yasuke returned to the Jesuit missionaries, judging him of no importance in the battles to come. Others suggest Yasuke slipped away in the chaos, vanishing into the countryside. The truth of that moment remains uncertain. What is certain is that Yasuke's story disappears from official chronicles after Nobunaga's fall. The Jesuits wrote that he returned to their service, living quietly, away from the clash of armies. Other tales whisper that he remained in Japan, protecting villages during the chaos that followed, guiding families through burned roads and broken provinces. One story tells of him escorting women and children from Kyoto to safety, fending off raiders with nothing but a spear and his towering presence. Meanwhile, the political landscape fractured. Nobunaga's generals scrambled to claim his legacy. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, once a low-born retainer, would rise swiftly to avenge his master and crush Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki. But Yasuke's name is absent from those accounts. History turned its page without him. Yet absence does not erase importance. Even in silence, Yasuke's presence lingered. Villagers remembered the giant who stood at the gates of Honnoji. Missionaries spoke of him in their letters, astonished that he had risen to stand among samurai. His fate may be uncertain, but his impact was undeniable. For Yasuke, the aftermath of Nobunaga's fall was not measured in titles or victories. It was measured in the loyalty he carried to the end, and in the legacy he left behind, a reminder that in a world of shifting alliances and betrayal, one man had remained steadfast. Centuries have passed since the fires of Honnoji consumed Nobunaga and changed the course of Japan. The names of great daimyo, feudal lords, still echo in history books: Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, Tokugawa, but among them, another name endures, whispered with both astonishment and respect: Yasuke. His fate after Nobunaga's fall remains uncertain, but his story survived in fragments carried across cultures. Some say he returned to the Jesuits who first brought him to Japan, living quietly in service until the end of his days. Others claim he remained in the country, moving unseen, perhaps even serving other lords in obscurity. And there are tales, half history, half legend, that he became a wandering ronin, masterless samurai, protecting villagers in the chaos that followed Nobunaga's death. Though records are few, what cannot be erased is what Yasuke represented. He was not born in Japan, nor did he inherit the bloodline of samurai. Yet he earned a place among them through loyalty, discipline, and courage. Nobunaga trusted him with his life, and even his rivals could not deny his presence changed the court of Azuchi forever. The image of Yasuke, towering, disciplined, and resolute, became part of Japan's memory of that turbulent age. In letters written by Jesuit missionaries, he was described with awe, a warrior who had risen higher than any outsider before him. In Japanese chronicles, his name appeared alongside generals and retainers, not as a curiosity but as a man who stood in the storm of history. In the centuries since, Yasuke's legend has grown beyond Japan. Across oceans and continents, his story inspires those who hear it. He is remembered not only as the first African samurai, but as a symbol of identity forged not by birthplace but by choice. His life reminds us that honor is not bound by borders, and loyalty can cross any sea. Standing at Nobunaga's side, Yasuke became part of a turning point in history, the moment when Japan shifted toward unity. Though he vanished from the chronicles, his presence shaped the men and the battles that followed. He proved that even in an age of suspicion and betrayal, one man could stand firm and be remembered for it. A historical note: Yasuke was real, recorded in the chronicles of Oda Nobunaga's court. His exact origins and final fate remain debated, but his role as Nobunaga's retainer is a fact that astonishes historians to this day. His story endures as one of the most remarkable intersections of cultures in history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from history and legend.